we were on the brink of a precipice by one vote, and I really honor the position of Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, because they stayed the course the whole time in spite of getting threats and various kinds of bullying tactics are employed on them by this administration, which is always very ham-fisted in everything that they do. But literally, and John McCain, it was a highly dramatic moment. And let me just tell you, maybe you've read that I wasn't planning to speak because I had spoken so many times already at rallies, on the floor, and I wasn't in the queue to speak. Patty Murray was in charge of the Democrats who were scheduled to speak. And I sat there thinking, maybe this is the last time that I'm going to get to say something, because I really thought that even if we had some indications that John McCain might vote against it, I don't believe it happens until it happens. Yeah. So I thought that this bill could pass, and then I had very little doubt that the House would just pass it. Wow, that we would not go to conference, or if we went to conference, it would be pro forma, and that they would in fact pass this terrible bill, and the president would eagerly sign it, and 17 million would be screwed, and not to mention everybody else who had pre-existing conditions and everything else. I thought, as I sat there, I thought maybe what more can I say? So it was very hard, as you could tell, and it's not often that we on the floor open ourselves up quite the way that I did, and that's why it was hard. And it's usually it's quite a formal kind of a setting, and I use prepared remarks. Most of us do, but that evening I did not, and I went to Patty and I said, I'd like to be able to speak within the next half hour if I could. And at that time, we were using up the Republicans' time because they did not have people coming to the floor. And so she said, it'll be okay, I can speak. And sort of, she put me ahead of some other people because she knew that I was on medication. Okay, do not tweet any of that. So she let me go ahead, but she said it should be okay because we're using up the Republicans' time. But then as they saw what was happening, they sent Mike Enzi to take up at least an hour just talking about whatever it was he was talking about. So a number of Democrats who were slated to speak could not speak, but my remarks have been viewed more than 3 million times. Amazing, isn't it? The power of the internet, and a lot of people really related to what I was saying because they're there, and we're all in it together. But the battle is not over, by the way.
No.
The battles continue, and every front you can think of. And today there's a kind of a back and forth going on with President Trump and North Korea, and saber rattling on both sides. It's really pretty insane. So that's going on, and healthcare still looms large. I'm going to be focusing very much, though, on hearing from different organizations, groups, how we can strengthen the Affordable Care Act. And I think that's where a lot of us are going to be spending our time, and Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray, who chairs the appropriate committee, will be holding hearings, and there will be many opportunities for those of us who are not on that committee to weigh in. And I've already talked to both Chuck Schumer and Patty that I want to be very involved. I told them that when I'm here in August that I'll be meeting with different organizations on what can we do. And there are things we can do. I mean, we ought to make sure that the funding continues to make sure that people can afford health care. This is money that goes to the insurance companies. We should stabilize the market, and we ought to let bulk purchasing of negotiated purchasing for Medicare to occur, and we should have a public option to provide more competition in the marketplace. So there are those, and it's going to be tough enough to get those through, by the way. And then we have the whole immigration issue going on. We probably have more hearings in the Judiciary Committee that relate to Russia and the Trump team's collaboration, collusion, if any. And our whole perspective has been to make sure that whoever is going to be making decisions, including the new FBI director, that they will be very independent of any pressure, political pressure from the president and the White House and the administration. So the Mueller investigation must continue. You have to follow the money. So I know you folks have been here every week.
Yes.
And I'm sure you have some thoughts that you'd like to share with me, or any questions or anything like that. I'd be happy to
I'm new
chat with you guys.
I'm new. I've never been to any
what
of
is
these.
your name?
I'm AJ Jager. I live in Kailua, and so many times when I'm watching everything that's going on, I told my husband it's not necessarily the crazy president that worries me, but the ones who've been there for too long. I feel like they're holding the power, and I feel like we are being held hostage by these Congress people, senator people, representatives that have been there just way too long. And
do you have any people in mind?
Other than like Mitch McConnell. And at what point, the president has term limits. How come our representatives don't? Because I feel like some of them are just taking advantage of being in there and follow the money. Yes, follow who's, the lobbyists. Where do we draw some lines so that the people are really represented?
No kidding.
When you think of some of the lines of the Senate, for example, and I'll just look at the Senate in terms of the contributions that they made, and they literally made life better for people. It's Ted Kennedy, it's Tom Harkin, it's all these people, and that's why I have said that we have term limits in the legislature. They're called elections.
That's right. Yeah.
So it is totally up to the people to figure out who the hell they're going to support, and it is up to all of us to figure out who's out there on our side, who's really on our side.
So then the counteract of that is all the lobbying and the PACs. So is there something going on to limit that?
There's a huge organization that has some members from Hawaii. I'm paraphrasing. I just met with them. It's basically to undo Citizens United.
Okay, that's good.
So and I met with them recently, and one of the things that we can maybe work toward in a very divided country is that on both the conservative, the whole ideological spectrum, there is this concern about money in politics.
Yes.
So even the Trump voters say they don't like all this dark money in politics, totally unreported, unaccounted for. And so this group is very much focused on how can we move forward to make some changes to Citizens United, and which would take, by the way, a constitutional amendment.
Wow.
And I have signed on to constitutional amendments, so it's going to take, I would say, a grassroots effort. And there are a lot of people who say, well, that's just Citizens United, who's on the Supreme Court, all this money, what does that have to do with us? But it permeates so much.
Everything.
And when the Koch brothers and their ilk will, this election, 2018, they will probably spend close to $1 billion. $1 billion. And money can go to any place in a nanosecond. When I ran for my seat, $2 million in dark money basically was spent to make sure that I didn't get elected. And $2 million in Hawaii goes a long way into it. Very few people know that. So I've been a proponent of things that we need to do to fight back against Citizens United. But I can give you all the name of their organization, and they don't have a chapter as such. They just have members all across the country. Something in the order of they have millions, and they raise money. I think the last time that
I'm familiar with them. There are a number of them. Common Cause does some stuff. There is a group, yes.
But this is one that's actually has the word Citizens United in it. It's like overturn Citizens United.
Let's get
right.
We'll disseminate it. Senator, we can't thank you enough for what you've done since we talked to you on that screen, however many months ago that was.
Time flies, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? Hawaii has been a bright spot in this otherwise pretty dark time in Washington. and you and Senator Schatz have been very much a part of that bright
Yep.
spot, and we thank you for that. And we told Alan this last week. We all got a little bit sort of irritated when Senator McCain was getting all that press coming back to vote, and we're like, our senator is going through the same thing, and she's been there every single day. So first I want to say thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you all.
And then we just had a nice chat upstairs with Senator Schatz, and someone asked a question, I think Jan did, wondering about bright spots on the other side of the aisle. And when will we have that tipping point where perhaps some of those lions who've been there a long time, whose policies we don't necessarily agree with, but who still have a commitment to this country, do you think they will
Patriots.
start to tip, or are we just going to fight this to the bitter end?
I think it's going to be really important for us to strengthen the resistance that we have to have against the Trump administration and their minions, and they're having a lot of impact at the administrative level, etc. And so we have to make sure that our resistance remains strong at the grassroots level. I think that's what's going to be important in this country, because it's not just us in the elected positions. The outcome of the Trump election and all of you folks galvanizing and continuing to stay engaged is a welcome sign. It gives me hope. When you see scientists marching, when's the last time they marched? All of this, it's just that we have to stay the course, and it has to manifest itself in some different people getting elected to make decisions on our behalf. And if those things don't change, in spite of the fact that on the House side, reapportionment has created these enclaves, that we can't necessarily just give up. You just have to hang in there. We have to make some changes, because otherwise the House is going to be it's going to be a tough place, because they just operate by majority rule, and they can just roll over everybody. And I just was watching Tim Ryan saying they were so frustrated because the Senate is blocking everything. And I'm thinking, yeah, thank goodness. That's why we're not the House. We're the Senate, and we have different rules. So it all matters. So the grassroots organizing is really, really important. And I have hope personally, especially as I said on the floor. A lot of people on the other side of the aisle wrote me really nice notes, including Ted Cruz. For real.
Really?
Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, Orrin Hatch, some of the most conservative members on the other side wrote me really personal notes and encouraging me and their prayers. All of that, which was very heartfelt. I know that. And for my own self, when I introduce bills, unless it's just a pure messaging bill that I know I'll never get a single Republican to support, my staff knows that they have to find a Republican co-sponsor for those bills. And so I have co-sponsored bills with Joni Ernst, one of the most, Iowa, very conservative. And in fact, I had wanted her to be a co-sponsor on a bill that allows for telemedicine and Medicare, so that people in rural areas. And my staff figured out that Iowa, a lot of rural areas, and they don't have access to healthcare providers. So she might be somebody who would be open to sponsoring this bill with me. It took a while, because she knows that I'm one of the most liberal members, and I'm sure they thought, why is Mazie wanting me to what is going on here? We should be very careful. But she co-sponsored the bill, and what was really nice, and it gives me hope, is that when she did the same thing for veterans, to have veterans be able to resort to telemedicine, she asked me to co-sponsor her bill.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And just recently, the Veterans Administration, which we have worked with to push this, and they supported it, they decided they had the authority to implement this on their own. So it was just only 2 days ago or so, that they are going to implement telemedicine for opportunities for veterans all across the country. And the last bill that President Obama signed of mine was one that I co-sponsored with Deb Fisher of Nebraska, another very conservative person. So
that's a great strategy.
I always have hope. And you know who helped Pat I'll tell you this story. even if I went after him, kind of tooth and nail, Jeff Sessions, he helped me pass my first bill as a senator.
Alan told us that story.
Yes. And it's really because I reached, I think, his heart.
I'm glad to know he has one.
But if you only had a brain.
Although it's not showing very much as Attorney General, I have to say.
Yeah.
So I have hope. But I also think it's critical for the grassroots all across the country to stay engaged, because the thing that the Trump people want is for all of us to go home and
Right, get tired,
not
If
come
you were to
out.
tell us to focus in one or two specific areas, I mean, we mobilized on the ACA and healthcare, obviously,
Yeah,
and
I heard from over 20,000 in Hawaii contacted me, which is extraordinary.
right.
The only other really huge outpouring was for Betsy DeVos, the education secretary, who doesn't believe in education.
Right.
That was about 5,000, I would say, counting people. So it matters. And then I love to watch the town hall meetings that my colleagues are having, and they're getting yelled at for a change, which does my heart good.
They're really fun to watch those, yes.
Yes.
You don't
What
think
do
they're
you
getting
think
standing ovations?
Pardon me?
You don't think they're getting standing ovations?
No. And the thing is that these are people who have already experienced what they get from the Affordable Care Act, so they know wherever they speak. Whereas when we passed the Affordable Care Act and we were having town hall meetings, we really, the some of the specifics, we weren't sure how it was going to work, and we were not good at conveying what we were trying to do, obviously. So death panels and all these totally false. We didn't call them fake stuff, but yeah, all of that took hold, and it was really bad. Some of my colleagues had coffins left on their front yards. That's how volatile this issue was. In 2010, we lost the House.
They may have coffins again in 2018.
Well, for real kind of coffins.
Yeah. Any areas
So-
you would tell us to focus on?
Well, I would say, there's three areas that I'm particularly focused on as being. One is in the foreign relations area, and that's North Korea continues to be, but that's maybe not something that, from a domestic standpoint, yes, national security is important, but I would say immigration and healthcare. And I also am very concerned about what's going to happen with our public schools with Betsy DeVos. So I'm going to pay attention to that. But really, in the immediacy, I would say immigration, healthcare.
This wasn't on our list, but I'd like to bring it up because it has to do with the integrity of elections, and it has to do with making sure in the budget that there's enough money for the census, because they're trying to gut
yes.
that. And then apparently Trump's office has eliminated the funding in office for the only federal entity that works with the states to ensure that their elections are good. So I'm thinking to 2018, between that coming up and then the 2020 election, in terms of redistricting for the, if we're going to preserve the institutions and have an election system that has a high degree of integrity, those are the kinds of things that can fall through the cracks.
Yes. Basically, this administration assaults all our values and just every front
Every
that
way.
you can think of. So that's what I mean by administratively, they're going to cut back on support for those kinds of things.
Right.
And after the Supreme Court's decision on the Voting Rights Act, and that's one of the questions I asked Jeff Sessions in his confirmation hearing was, are you going to review all of these, what we would characterize as voter suppression laws being passed by all these states? Are you going to affirmatively? Because right now, I mean, with the gutting of the major portion of the Voting Rights Act, these states do not have to get prior approval
Right.
from the Justice Department. So it would be incumbent upon the Justice Department to affirmatively, and I don't think they're going to do that, not under Jeff Sessions,
No.
which means that organizations like NAACP and others will have to use their limited resources to challenge these Voting Rights Act state by state by state,
Right.
and they have been doing so.
Right.
But it's tough, right?
Yep.
Well, thank goodness there are organizations like that.
So we hear rumblings about that Pence is preparing to take over. Is there that same
Don't you
feeling?
love that?
Do you guys hear that too?
Well, I
mean, I don't know. I'm just wondering. We listen
Well,
to the
that's-
fake news,
it's
and
all
so
over
I'm
the-
just
it's all
wondering
over
what
the
the real
news
news is
now.
out there.
it's all over the news now, despite his denials.
Yeah. I mean, not even just a run. It's not just the run for 2020. I've heard he's already preparing that he might have to step in to take over.
If
with
you
this
were
administration.
advising Pence, wouldn't you? You never know what's going to happen with Donald Trump. It's
That's
almost too hard to believe that he would exit before his time.
Well, he could have a stroke. I mean, we don't know.
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
So if I were Pence, I would be
I would
preparing
agree.
to
I mean,
take
that's the
over.
smart thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And frankly, there are some people, as I talk to people from all over the country, they ask, what's worse, a Pence or
What do you take on it?
I think that Trump is worse because he has no moral values, no moral center. Whereas at least Pence, kind of where he is. You don't agree with him, but I think that to have the president as the liar in chief and who lies every single day. As one parent said to me, how do I tell my son that lying is not good? Exactly. So I think that to have a president that is an empty suit and no moral center is worse.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One last question. The generals. What do you think about having all these generals? It's supposed to be a civilian government.
Yeah. Well, even I, after I met with General Mattis, because it was very clear that Trump would need some mature,
Grown-ups.
experienced people, and so we had to waive the requirement that that the generals stay in a civilian sector for at least 7 years, I believe it was for. So I did that for General Mattis. Yes, well, Trump, clearly he likes people with power.
Yeah.
And he's attracted to people who abuse their power. He likes strong men. So he says nice things about Duterte in the Philippines, and of course Putin. That's very odd, that whole attitude toward Putin. But I think it has to do with some relationships that he has.
Follow the money.
Alan shared a story last week about the Australia conversation. Was that last week or maybe 2 weeks ago? I don't remember. The whole notion that as the commander-in-chief, as military brass, when he gives the order, they are duty-bound to follow it. Does that give you pause?
Well, one example when the brass did not follow his tweet was on transgender people serving in the military. And I'm really glad that the Pentagon said, we do not change everything based on a tweet. And that's pretty much the last we heard of that notion. So I see signs of people applying some thought to the decisions. But the most recent statement from Trump about North Korea resulted in saber rattling on both sides. Not a good situation.
So, Senator, what Paul was referring to is Admiral Swift had to respond to a question from a reporter that basically asked if the president directed you to use nuclear weapons, what will you do? And I'm paraphrasing, I think, but Admiral Swift had no choice to answer but the way he did because of the chain of command and the commander-in-chief, based on the scenario, said I would do what my commander-in-chief instructed me to. But PACOM, I understand, may have issued some more clarifying language, but where we're talking about in the context of we are now in a reality that these are the types of questions that are being asked of someone like Admiral Swift, who the Senator has worked with, very practical, I think, I mean, he understands the world and the dangers, particularly in this region. But for him to have to say something like that, I mean, he had no choice in some respects, because he had to play the role that he does as the St. Pat Fleet commander.
One would hope that there might be some intervening players before that button is ultimately pressed, especially with this president. And that's why the Senate took the unprecedented position of, in passing the Russian sanctions law, that we actually put in place some checks on what this president can do. And it wouldn't have been in there requiring congressional approval before he lifts any sanctions if it weren't this particular president making those kinds of decisions.
Well, there is a historic precedent because apparently Alexander Butterfield, they thought Nixon was going to press a button
Oh,
just before he resigned because he was mentally unstable,
Yes.
and Butterfield came in and had the
Yes.
rule was before he presses a button, you got to talk to these three guys. That came out.
yes.
I just read an article about that. So
I kind of think that's what I
Probably-
mean about there's got to be some
Yeah.
intervening
yeah,
players before the button is pressed.
well, it's a great way to take the attention off of what's going on.
I know the rest of you have questions. Jan?
I do.
Jan, over
Yes.
here.
My name's Debbie. In the big scheme of things, I've been impressed with all of the different groups that have come together since the election and the energy that's out there. What would you recommend for us as the best way to get our messages across? Is it marches? Is it postcards to the different offices? Is it, what are the things that you see as most effective?
Well, I live in the political arena where elections matter. And I became politicized marching against the Vietnam War. It felt good. There you were, and at the time that I was protesting the war, it wasn't as though that it was that popular to protest the war. So we felt quite righteous. So we're there singing "We Shall Overcome." But I tell you, a group of us said that's not enough. We have to sit at the table. So therefore, many of us went back to school. Most of us ran for office, got elected. I think elections matter. So if this activism doesn't turn into some changes as to who actually gets to go to Congress and the House and Senate, we're just going to be always up against it. And so to grow the resistance to the point where, and the reality is that there's going to be a heck of a lot of money spent to make sure that people like me, all across the country, and moderates even, you got Joe Manchin in West Virginia. You got Joe Donnelly in Indiana. So they've tried to get rid of all the moderates within the Republicans. It's pretty sad, right? Now they're trying to do that with the Democrats. So as far as I'm concerned, we've got to make sure that the people turn out. And when I read about the post-2016 election and the African Americans didn't come out in the numbers they should have, could have, a growing group of API, Asia Pacific Islander communities being mobilized.
Well, don't
That's
we here
what
in
it's gonna
Hawaii
take,
have
in my
one of the
view.
lowest turnouts?
Oh yes, and here we
Why?
have
What can we do?
We have the lowest voter turnout in the entire country.
What can we
Nothing to be
do?
proud of. I don't know what it is that what do we just feel so safe? I really don't know, but an organization that I am the founder of, the Patsy Taming Political Action Committee, at one point we hired pollsters to figure out, not just talking to register voters, but women as to why they didn't participate. And some of the results were really telling, which I think the highest one was that and I don't believe that this is really true, that they just were lazy. I don't think that's it. I think that the second highest was along the lines of we don't think we know enough to cast a vote, and that's so
That
typical.
it's a complicated process. You mean
Well, that they don't
rather
know,
than learn it.
they don't know enough
yeah,
about the
the issues,
candidates
right,
and the
yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
I asked a friend of mine one time why she didn't vote, and what she told me was because we're last and our votes don't matter
I've read.
because of the time
sorry.
sequence.
But when
Yeah,
you
that
argue-
only that only
That's only for
happens for
president.
presidential
Right,
elections.
right,
What's the
right.
excuse for every other
Right,
election?
right.
Local.
And before it used to be we don't want to serve on juries. Well, that's no longer the case because you sign up for just about anything in the jury pool anyway.
I read
So-
too that there's still a lot of anger left over from the overthrow of the monarchy, and that some of the people here, a lot of them don't consider this a valid administration, of the United
I would say that's a
States.
very small minority
Maybe,
because
yeah.
Native Hawaiians have done their own get out the vote, and I think their slogan was no vote, no what?
No
grumble.
No grumble.
Yeah, I remember that.
So I don't know. That's something that we can help. Frankly, I'm not supposed to be talking politically over here, but let's take time out. I mean, there are so many places all across the country that could use the help of energize people from Hawaii, and whatever it takes, and the funding part of it is also really important.
Senator, if it gives you hope, I would just say to you, and I can say it and then you're not saying it, there is a group who is now phone banking almost weekly for other elections in other
Right.
states. So they're gathering in Hawaii every Saturday.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
phone banking to Washington State. There's a district in
Right.
Indiana, I think.
Who do you folks call?
So it's run through sister district, and so they assign us a district and give us a script and a small group, and we're hoping to make it a larger group.
So what's the script?
The script is a get out the vote one, that this candidate, it's an education issue, and they're targeting confirmed or likely voters on the blue side of the aisle.
We just did a city council in
there you
Seattle, I think,
Yeah.
to switch that. So they're going real local, which
That
is
is really
fantastic.
great. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's called Sister District, and
Yep.
we've signed
Sister district?
Sister District. And so and then the group here, because they are local and we just don't always follow the rules, they were never assigned the Ossoff campaign, for example, but they're like, we're going to call in Georgia anyway. So they started calling in Georgia. They just called up the Ossoff campaign and said, send us a list.
And we've been doing that texting too. There's a couple of organizations.
Yeah.
I'll do
So
like
it is
5,000 a
starting
day.
to happen.
That's really terrific, getting out the votes. And frankly, I don't know what we can do regarding Hawaii. Voting is a habit, and this is why I was one of the earliest supporters of Kids Vote. And so voting is a habit, their analysis, right? So you can have, if your parents don't vote, for example, then chances are not so great that you'll vote. But Kids Vote, a lot of the kids took their parents felt bad, so they would vote. And one of the nice things about Kids Vote is that when I ran for governor, I won the Kids Vote. I just lost it. I run into people who say, I voted for you in 3rd grade. And now they're voting for me for real.
That's so interesting.
And one of them happens to be my press secretary.
That's a good
Voting
start.
is a habit. Starts young.
Any thought about paying people like they do, or fining people for not voting like they do in
Like
Australia?
Yeah. Oh, I just feel like, that gives me a little bit of a heartburn.
Yeah.
Because you would think that we care enough, right, about our democracy and our privilege to vote, that people died for.
As a lifelong hotel worker, they have a very low turnout, and for voting, and I think that if a lot of times it's because they're just so busy working like 2 jobs, rushing in between.
Right.
And if we could somehow teach them the importance, I mean, I try to tell my fellow workers, you've got to get out there, you got to vote, it counts. And our union, Gil is great.
Oh, I know. Eric is one of the most aggressive activists.
But
in
I mean,
the
it's a huge fight with to get them out there.
Interesting.
Well, part of it is that maybe they can get more used to absentee voting.
Mail-in ballots.
It's not very gratifying to do it.
It would make a difference.
Well, that depends on why people don't bother to
Right.
vote.
If
Because
it's a time
they're
thing,
supposed to be given time.
But a lot of times that doesn't happen.
Yeah. So whatever the reasons are,
Yeah.
we make it really, really easy to vote in Hawaii, and so many other places. There are some who say that we should just go to a plain mail-in ballot, but I think there are pros and cons to that. And Oregon does it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Complex.
if every group that I talk to, AAUW and all those other groups, I say, here's a project. Here's a project. How can we have a much better voter turnout in our own state? When we first got elected, when we first became a state, we had the highest voter turnout in the entire country. Highest voter turnout, and now it's the lowest.
Well, there's a doctoral thesis right there.
What's going on?
I write for Hawaii Business. I'm thinking there's an article right there.
Yeah, we're becoming, I don't know what. I don't know
But
what's
we
happening.
also had one of the highest rates of literacy way back in the day, before we were a state.
And now not? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we're not top at the top.
Interesting.
there doesn't seem to be that caring of, you know, finishing school or getting a higher degree when you're in some of the local schools. It's like, oh.
I visit a lot of schools. There are a lot of really good changes happening in our schools where they don't regard education as buns on seats. And people learn mainly by doing. So I will be meeting with educators and asking them, well, what kind of environment are we creating where teachers can be creative and enabling their students to learn.
Education is important if you don't know about it.
What are your biggest fears with DeVos and DOE?
Well, she's going to want to basically, have vouchers for private schools and create tax credits for people who give money to private schools. That's what they did in Michigan and other places that she's set foot in. And that those kinds of methods have not improved the education outcomes for their kids at all. And yet, here she is. There are very few secretaries of anything that I've been able to vote for in this administration.
We have appreciated that.
And the ones that I do vote for, it's like, keep my fingers crossed. Please stand up to the president.
Who do you think in this administration is most likely to stand up to this president?
I'm hopeful that General Mattis will. There's a lot at stake at Department of Defense. So I'm hopeful that he will.
Is that the last one?
I am hopeful that if we confirm the new FBI director, that he will. He came across as being very committed to the FBI as an independent institution, and unlike the meeting that I had with Neil Gorsuch, our Supreme Court nominee, the FBI nominee was, I thought, so much more. Humble. That was one thing, but he came across as somebody who really believed in the independence of the institution. So I'm hopeful that should he be confirmed, and he's on the list for confirmation when we go back, that he will in fact stand up. And I'm really glad that our Deputy Attorney General is standing firm on the Mueller investigation. So far he's showing signs after the initial sort of like this, and I thought, oh my God, but then he fucked up.
Do you think General John Kelly will bring some order to the chaos in the White House?
I wish him luck, because frankly I wasn't all that thrilled with him at Homeland Security, although I had voted for him because I thought he had experience of leading people and leading large organizations. But he was very much engaged in the whole deportation effort of this administration.
Then what about the defunding for sanctuary cities and?
Well, there are some cities that are fighting back.
Yes.
So Rahm Emanuel, Chicago, and there are other cities that are filing suits. So
isn't Honolulu considered a sanctuary city, or do we never take that?
I don't know if we've actually.
We're working on that right now with J20 to try to get something together.
Yeah, the legislature let that one die, along with many other things this past year.
But aren't we supportive of the private, the Paris Climate Agreement, or did that not?
Yeah, no, we're good on that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Just not sanctuary.
But I think we were the first ones
fortunately,
to step
I
up.
think a lot of the positive efforts relating to the climate change and global warming is happening at the state and regional levels.
And is that part of the message then to us, to work locally?
Yes, very much so. We took the ball we took our eyes off a lot of the grassroots kind of organization that needed to occur. That's how we lost governorships, state legislatures. So, yes, we have to get people into the pipeline.
Good. You've given us more time.
Thank you very much for all that.
Alan has said this many times. There are many cancer survivors in this room right now.
Oh.
And so we are with you.
Okay, yes. Thank you.
We love you.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you.
Thank you very much. It means a lot to me.
And